Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. So as you can tell based on the title, well today we are going to be talking about Loewe, and it may not be surprising, but it was just announced that the designers at Proenza Schouler, Lazaro Hernandez and Jack McCullough are going to be the new creative directors at Loewe. So I first saw this from WWD, and they stated, designers Jack McCullough and Lazaro Hernandez, better known as the duo behind New York label Proenza Schouler, are the new creative directors at Loewe effective April 7th. Confirming a widely expected move exclusively to WWD, Loewe said McCullough and Hernandez would carry the entire creative responsibility of all Loewe collections across women's wear, menswear, leather goods, and accessories. In an exclusive interview, Loewe Chief Executive Officer Pascal Lepoivre elaborated on the choice of McCullough and Hernandez for the Plum Paris Post. Quote, to name just two factors, they are highly creative and also entrepreneurs whose curiosity and vision go beyond fashion and extend to diverse cultural fields as well as the diversity of markets and customers that we talk to. She told WWD, they are warm, open, and lively, an excellent fit with a company culture of being intense and passionate while also committed to being playful and not taking ourselves too seriously. So I talked about this on my channel a few months ago when it was announced that they would be leaving their own brand, Proenza Schouler, which was launched in 2002. And of course, LVMH is going through a major change with a lot of these different appointments of designers. And I think one of the main reasons why they've gone for these designers is, well, of course, they no longer have a brand. And I wonder if that was part of the deal, that they would step away from their own brand so that they could solely focus on Loewe. And I guess the deal was really good that they decided to do that. We'll talk about their work in just a moment, but on one side, one thing I will say, I do think that just doing my video on Jonathan Anderson and just talking about his trajectory, I thought how amazing it was that they took a chance on Jonathan Anderson. They appointed him to Loewe. They not only did that, but they invested in his own brand, and it just became this really exciting brand about experimentation. On one side, part of me thinks, wouldn't it have been great though if they hired an emerging designer, a new designer, very experimental designer? But when we think about how LVMH has been doing, how luxury in general, there has been a slump. Of course, LVMH is not experiencing the same kinds of struggles that Kering is facing, but I think LVMH, they really want to keep it safe. LVMH has done two things differently from Kering, and I think because of it, they've been able to weather the storm a little bit better. When you just look at their different roster of brands, how there's different stylistic propositions, like even at Louis Vuitton, there's two different creative directors. Same thing at Dior. Of course, Kim Jones just left Dior. Speculated Maria Grazia Curie is going to be stepping down and Jonathan Anderson might take over. That's the rumor at least. But again, two different stylistic propositions. Celine had Eddie, and we are yet to see Michael Ryder's debut show, which is going to be in July. But again, very different from previously mentioned brands. Fendi at this point is now helmed by Sylvia Fendi, a different stylistic proposition. And again, Jonathan Anderson at Loewe. LVMH also has Laurel Piana, which is doing a quiet luxury thing. Givenchy just hired Sarah Burton. They also have Marc Jacobs as a part of their roster. So LVMH is significantly larger than Kering. Each one of their brands is doing something different. There are different styles that can speak to different customers, which I think has really helped LVMH. Another point is that a lot of these designers that are being appointed are pretty established. LVMH, for a lot of their recent appointments, they've been giving them to more so established designers versus Kering. Maybe this is going to change with recent moves, but Kering, for instance, they had Salvatore Di Sarno at Gucci, who was just let go after 18 months. Sean McGear, also a new designer at McQueen. Newer names that most people were not familiar with. And with that, they have to find their footing, learn how to creatively lead a brand, as well as create commercial products that will sell. And I think with the designers at Proenza Schouler, they at least know that, right? They at least know that they are experienced in that world. And maybe if this was a different time period where LVMH could take on more risk and hire an emerging designer, which in my honest opinion, I would have loved to see. It would have been great to see, especially because LVMH did take a chance on Jonathan Anderson, who was an emerging name, but they really gave him a chance. And as a result, he was able to have such an incredible career at Loewe for 11 years, and it proved to be really successful. But of course, at that time, the stakes weren't as high. And at Loewe, which is become now a 1.07 billion euro brand. When Jonathan Anderson joined the brand, it was only at around 230 million euros. I think when a brand kind of hits this point, like, more is just at stake. I don't really think LVMH, unfortunately, at this point wants to take that many risks. Even with some of these smaller brands like Stella McCartney and Off-White, they've offloaded. It does make sense from a business perspective why they chose them. Again, according to the CEO, they have more of that entrepreneurial mindset, that business mindset, but then they also state how they're able to go beyond fashion and extend to diverse cultural fields, as well as to the diversity of markets and customers that we talk to. I've done a few videos on Proenza Schouler, but just to refresh, Proenza Schouler, it is a New York fashion brand. And Jack McCullough and Lazaro Hernandez, they met while studying at Parsons School of Design in New York. For their senior thesis, they collaborated on a collection that really became the foundation of the brand. And the name Proenza Schouler, it actually comes from the designer's maiden names. This collection was so successful that it was bought by Barney's New York, which is a major achievement. It really launched their careers. And I think there was just this like perfect fusion of luxury level, but there was this contemporary downtown coolness that they had, and they found great success. They won 5 CFDA awards, including Women Designer of the Year in 2007, 2011, and 2013. And in 2008, though, I think this was a major year, the brand, they introduced the PS1 satchel. Now, this is probably their most iconic bag. It became, I think, the it bag of 2008 and really defined, I think, the style of the late 2000s, early 2010s. And I want to say it bag, but at the time, the PS1, there was something about it that felt like it was trying to like buck a lot of the trends of the time. It was almost in a way like an anti-it bag. It was understated, it was very functional, and it reflected the sense of relaxed luxury. Silhouette was very different for the time. It was going for this more rectangular satchel style when compared to, if we think about the styles of the mid 2000s, oddly enough, a lot of the styles that we are seeing in fashion coming back right now with this 20-year cycle, the Chloe Paddington, the Fendi Spy bag, which are being reissued. Other bags that I think of from this mid 2000s era, the Marc Jacobs Stan bag. A lot of these like rounded styles. There was a little more bulk to them, prominent hardware, rings, buckles, padlocks. Think of the mid 2000s especially as this period where we saw a lot of this boho maximalism. But then in 2008, this was when the recession happened, and there was something about this bag that just felt right. It felt cleaner, a little bit more futuristic, but it still had this timeless appeal. Like this satchel shape felt more timeless, didn't have any prominent logos or branding. I think it also spoke to, there was also this emerging indie style, this kind of appeal to this more hipster look back in the day, but it just ticked off a lot of boxes. And I think this bag, it really did set this new tone when it came to handbags. This was probably their most successful creation. They did, however, have some other great bags that I think also define the 2010s aesthetic. When I look at the PS11, so this was a bag that was introduced in 2011. It spoke to that kind of style, these kind of boxier styles. There was also the book bag, the PS13, the lunch bag, which felt like an evolution on the PS1. There was the Have a bag, more of this top handle style, the Hex bag, the curl clutch. These bags, specifically the Hex and the curl clutch, something about them, they could be evolved on, fit into the world of Loewe. There was the PS19, and I think these types of bags in the 2010s still felt of the time. I do think in the 2020s, as a result of like the changing styles, you do see a bit of a difference in terms of silhouette. Like the ruched shoulder bag, this bag feels a little less structured. The padded latch shoulder bag, again, when there was that like padded trend. There's the Morris tote, the Sullivan, the puffy chain bag, the pipe bag, the Dia bag, the braided chain leather bag, the drawstring bag, the bar bag. I actually quite like this bag. It's probably one of my favorites of this recent era. But I will say, when it came to a lot of the styles of the 2020s, I don't think they felt as hyped or as hot as Proenza Schouler bags once were. I even just think about their impact on fashion in the late 2000s, early 2010s versus the 2020s. It just hasn't been, I think, like the it girl brand. Of course, certain brands, they do like cycle in and out. Like when I think about Chanel right now, it isn't really the brand that everyone's talking about. Of course, handbag lovers are going to talk about it, but But in terms of pushing fashion forward, I don't think Chanel at the moment has been an it brand. And that's something that just happens in fashion versus the 2010s or the 90s. Like certain brands just, I think, have certain periods where they like resonate more with the times. But they did have some cool styles, other evolutions of the PS1, like the Park shoulder bag, the flip bag. These feel like different evolutions on the PS1. Just my overall thoughts on the brand, I actually really do like the aesthetic of Proenza Schouler. I've talked about them on my channel before. I've never actually owned one of their handbags. When the PS1 came out, I definitely could not afford it. The PS1, it was such an iconic bag. I think it really ushered in this late 2000s, early 2010s style. I actually really do like the bar bag. That's probably like my favorite of their recent styles. But I don't think Proenza Schouler has had a major moment or has been able to keep the momentum going to the level it was during the late 2000s, early 2010s. One thing that is interesting to me is the way I've heard this brand be described of recent, and I'll hear people say it's kind of like Old Celine or the Row, but it's priced better. So looking at the prices, I think, yeah, some of these bags are very similar to the aesthetics of the Row or Old Celine, but I don't think the price is that much better. Maybe this is just me. When looking at the Silo bag, again, very similar to the Row 90s bag, very popular bag from the Row, but it's only $100 less. If you have a preference towards the proportions of this bag, it also has like a longer shoulder strap. I don't know if the leather will be on par as the Row. Of course, the Row didn't invent the barrel bag at all, but I have noticed these past few years, when they do come out with designs, they do look vaguely similar to other successful recent bags. And when I look at the way these bags are styled or the creative direction of these collections, they do feel very much in this world of the Row and Phoebe Philo Celine. If I look at like the Brandt bag, again, very similar to the Rose Park tote. Also not much difference in price. It's actually like basically the same in price. The Tate bag, it's another bag that looks like if you combined the Celine belt bag with how the Alaïa Latecolle, like the handles on the Alaïa Latecolle. The Proenza Schouler bag is actually going for more than the Celine belt bag. In my mind, Celine is much more of a upper tier brand than Proenza Schouler, but maybe this is a phenomenally made bag, I don't know. It does feel like they're offering like more so an alternative option to very popular styles. You can tell it's not even just like the designs of the bags, but I think like the styling and the creative direction. Some bags are a little bit more friendlier in terms of pricing. Now, one thing that Proenza Schouler does have is the white label, which is more of an affordable diffusion line. I will say though, when it comes to Proenza Schouler bags, I don't think their recent designs have personally been speaking to me that much. With the exception of the bar bag, I actually like that bag. But another thing, as I'm thinking about, would I potentially get the bar bag? And in my mind, I also know that Proenza Schouler has been always one of these brands. You wait it out for the sales to happen and then it's cheaper. And that's kind of the thing, like there is no like urgency to buy it. Like it's always been like one of these brands where it's just, if I wait, there will be more savings. Whereas I know the Row 90s bag won't go on sale. Yeah, something about the bar bag, like the silhouette, the way it could be folded over, clutched, even just like the straps. Like I feel like this is a style that I could see at Loewe, like the sculptural handles. When I was looking at Jonathan Anderson's work at Loewe, I did a video on it. If I look at some of his earlier work at Loewe, I do see crossover with a brand like Proenza Schouler. If I just look at the Proenza Schouler, the Hex bag, the style like feels like a relative of the Loewe puzzle line. I do think Jonathan Anderson though, like there was an evolution in his style, and I think that's also why Loewe became super successful. They were able to create really unique accessories, his bags, his shoes. They never felt like they were catching up to whatever was the trend of the time. They never felt like an afterthought. I would never call Loewe like quiet luxury like at all, but I think what is interesting about his bags is whenever people would talk about quiet luxury bags or bags that fit the criteria, Loewe bags would be mentioned in terms of bags with less branding. There was like a focus on the quality of leather. Loewe had bags that like appealed to this customer, but then they also had very experimental styles like the Paseo bag. A personal favorite of mine is the diamond bag. It's just too expensive. I'm not going to buy this bag. They also had the squeeze bag and these like fruity finishes. The tomato bag was inspired by a meme. There was the asparagus bag. If I just think about like the overall vibe and tone of Jonathan Anderson, it's very different from Proenza Schouler, not even just in bags, but also in fashion. And I think of recent, the creative direction has felt very old Celine. If I look at some of the recent ready-to-wear, it looks very much in line with old Celine that we saw 8 years ago. Even just like the artistic direction, the poses, the models with this like deadpan stare. And I think it's also interesting that we have Michael Ryder, not sure what his Celine is going to look like, but he was at Celine with Phoebe Philo for a decade. So I wonder if that influence is going to be felt at his Celine. I wonder if it might take on a preppy direction. Not quite sure, but we'll see in July. Of course, LVMH has invested in Phoebe Philo's brand. LVMH also owns quiet luxury brands like Loro Piana, Moina. So I don't know. I guess just as somebody that really enjoys this aesthetic, I love Phoebe Philo. I love the Row. I love old Celine. I'm just going to be so honest. I don't know if I necessarily need to go to Loewe for this style. Now, one thing I will say, if you look at Proenza Schouler's older work, it didn't always have this old Celine aesthetic that they've been doing in the 2020s. When I think of Proenza Schouler, personally, this is just what I remember from back in the day, especially the late 2000s, early 2010s. It was very much this brand that had this New York, cool, experimental style. When I think about like what Phoebe Philo has been doing, it's very much this like chic, mature elegance with this artsy twist. But when I think of Proenza Schouler, when I first started seeing this brand more, to me it just had this like cool New York edge. Like when I think about brands like Bakir or Opening Ceremony or Alexander Wang, these types of brands at the time, they really had this New York edgy style, and maybe just like fashion moved on, but it felt like Proenza Schouler was kind of like the top of the style, this like edgy, experimental, forward, almost like futuristic New York style. Now when I think of the New York style that Proenza Schouler has moved towards, if I think about brands like The Row, Kate, Tibby, Savette, it's very different. Now, my hope is that these designers, they take this new appointment at Loewe to try something different, to go back into this direction of experimentation, to go in, I think, a different direction. There is a reason why LVMH appointed them. They're not only like just a safe choice business-wise, they know the importance of accessories when it comes to Loewe. It is a leather house, so there is going to be this expectation, I'm sure, to make a really cool bag. The way Jonathan Anderson made the puzzle bag, and it just kind of became the bag that defined that. And I think if they're able to do that, to create something very quite experimental and different, to take on a new perspective and build a new world around this, I think they'll do really well. In one area, I do think that there is crossover with Jonathan Anderson. Like when I think about Jonathan Anderson, he was very much interested in contemporary art. He would reference artists like Tracy Emin or Franz Erhard Walther, and that just worked so well for him at Loewe. And these references have always been present at Proenza Schouler. They're very obvious references to artists. Like even if I just look at their denim section, the Ellsworth jeans, the Ryman jeans, the Jasper jeans, all named after very famous American modern artists, or a lot of these artists that came to post-war America. It was just the place for a lot of artists to go. And they are American designers. They are New York designers. When I think about this New York aesthetic that they are native to, I think of the New York school. It's very present in their work. I was looking at this crushed metal dress and I thought, this ready-to-wear piece, phenomenal. It's this mix of copper, metal, silk yarns. The metal fibers create this crushed look, but then the velvet creates this interesting textural sheen. I just think it looks so cool. They also have these ice dyed pieces. So the way they're made, from what I understand, there are these like blocks of ice placed on top of these powder dyes, and as the ice melts, the colors blend and dye the fabric and create this really interesting effect. When looking at their ready-to-wear, and I want to make this distinction of ready-to-wear between handbags, the importance of process and process is art, and being able to see the process in the art. I think these are ideas that are very much expressed in when I think about like the New York School of Art. Going back to the denim, they use this screen printed technique. The dye does not saturate every detail, but it creates these natural imperfections, and we see this imprint of the denim. And so when I see these moves in their ready-to-wear, I think, oh yes, of course, this belongs at Loewe. But I also think it could expand to their handbags, to the way they design handbags. And Loewe is known for their handbags, their leather goods, and it would be really exciting to see that there. Again, I hope this is a new opportunity for Lazaro and Jack to bring on a new perspective, but also for them to look at how they create in a different way. And I think they are incredibly talented designers, and I think this is a move that is hopefully for the best for them. And of course, we've talked about Jonathan Anderson. He's leaving Loewe. Speculation, again, it has not been confirmed, but Jonathan Anderson, it is speculated he goes to Dior. We haven't heard the announcement or confirmation yet, but maybe, I don't know, maybe even today we get the announcement. Who knows? But yeah, that's my video for today. I would love to know your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me in another video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.